Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, so today we're going to unravel one of the most absolutely fascinating mysteries that is literally hiding right out in the open, in the animal kingdom. I mean, look at us. We humans might look pretty harmless, right? We've got no claws, no fangs, we're basically just soft primates. Yet, to the natural world, we are an absolute walking nightmare. Today we're exploring why animals universally fear us way more than the most dangerous, heavily armed predators on Earth.
Section 1, the savannah's greatest fear.
To really understand this, let's travel to a watering hole in South Africa. Researchers went out and hit a speaker in the bushes to put a totally calm herd of elephants to the ultimate test. Okay, let's dive into this. When they play the recorded sound of a fierce, roaring lion, the elephants barely react. I mean, maybe a few just raise their heads in mild interest. To them, lions are a known, frankly manageable threat. But then, the very same speaker plays a human voice. Not yelling, just a calm, conversational voice saying, hello. And you know what happens? The entire herd absolutely bolts. It's a massive, immediate panic, and they run faster and more completely than they did for the literal king of beasts. And it wasn't just the elephants either. Researchers ran this exact same experiment across 19 different species in Kruger National Park. We're talking everyone from giraffes to rhinos, and 95% of species fled faster from a human voice than an actual lion. Which, raises a massive question. Why run from us? Why flee from a physically unimpressive, clawless primate over an apex predator built explicitly for killing?
Section 2, global proof of panic.
Now, you might be thinking this fear is just some local quirk of the African savanna. Nope. Conservation biologist Liana Zanet and her team actually set out to measure this exact panic globally. They set up these hidden cameras and speakers at natural feeding sites all over to rigorously record how wild animals react to different audio playbacks. And the results across continents are honestly a little unsettling. Bam, 14 seconds. That is the incredibly fast average time it takes wildlife to completely abandon a watering hole after hearing just the sound of a human voice. Contrast that number with traditional threats. It takes animals a significantly longer average of 23 seconds to flee from actual lions, barking dogs, or even gunshots. So across the board, wildlife was twice as likely to run and abandon those areas roughly 40% faster for us than for their natural predators. And when we look at specific apex predators, the behavior is just stunning. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that in California, pumas fled 83% of the time upon hearing a human voice, compared to just 6% for a harmless frog control sound. Think about that for a second. These big, fierce cats literally chose hunger. They abandoned their fresh meals entirely, reducing their feeding time by more than half just so they didn't have to risk staying anywhere near a person. This deeply ingrained fear holds up across completely unrelated ecosystems too. Australian marsupials, they flee humans almost 2.5 times more often than from dogs or wolves. And incredibly, British badgers show a dramatically stronger fear response to human voices than to recordings of bears and wolves. Now remember, bears and wolves were eliminated from the British landscape centuries ago. These badgers have literally never personally encountered a wolf or a bear in their lives, yet they remain far more terrified of us than the ancient enemies of their ancestors. Section 3, the super predator. Because this pattern holds up so consistently across the board, scientists have formally given humans a specific, frankly intimidating, scientific designation, the super predator. And no, that's not because we'd somehow win a one-on-one fistfight with a bear, but because of our unique lethality at scale. Look, unlike a lion whose hunting methods really haven't changed much in the last 10,000 years, human lethality has constantly escalated. Starting over 300,000 years ago with sharpened sticks, we upgraded to spears and bows, then to traps operating at a massive scale across whole landscapes, then firearms, and finally, fast-moving vehicles. This unpredictable, highly coordinated technology just rapidly outpaced traditional predators. We kill far beyond what is needed for a single meal, making us the most far-reaching killer in literally every ecosystem we enter. But you gotta wonder, how did prey figure this out so quickly? Unlike the fear of snakes, which took millions of years to hardwire into primate brains, the fear of humans spreads like wildfire through a population via social transmission. An animal doesn't actually need to survive a hunt to learn. They learn by direct experience, sure, but also by observing the grim outcome of a less cautious neighbor, or simply from parent to offspring. A mother deer fleeing at the sound of a human voice teaches her fawn the exact correct response instantly, without a single word being exchanged. Section 4,
The deadly island exceptions.
Now, there is a dramatic and really tragic historical twist for the populations of animals that didn't get this evolutionary memo in time. So, the crucial point is this concept right here, ecological naivete. This happens when an isolated population never develops a fear response because a predator simply didn't exist in their environment. The absolute most famous example is the Mauritius dodo bird. It evolved with no significant land predators. So when human sailors arrived in the late 16th century, it just waddled right up to them out of pure curiosity, entirely lacking the instinct to flee. And unfortunately, that total lack of caution drove them to extinction within a century.
The catastrophic price of this isolation is staggering. Look at this. Over 90% of global bird extinctions since the year 1500 occurred on islands. These species completely lacked the ancestral memory to fear humans, or even the cats and rats that we brought with us on our ships. For thousands of generations, the threat genuinely had never existed for them, so they had absolutely zero instinctual framework to recognize us as something to run away from.
And we actually still see this naive curiosity today. Galapagos tortoises will let tourists take close-up photos right in their faces, and Antarctic penguins will often just waddle right up to researchers. Now, these animals aren't unintelligent. Their fear is just surgically calibrated to ocean predators like orcas because they never faced a large land-based threat. The only reason they survive our presence today is because of strict protective international treaties, ensuring we don't become a danger to them.
Section 5. Megafauna to human shields.
Let's connect this deep, ancient history of fear to the absolute largest animals on Earth. Tens of thousands of years ago, the planet hosted massive megafauna, mammoths, giant ground sloths, literally taller than modern elephants, and giant kangaroos. But shortly after modern humans arrived on their respective continents, they vanished entirely. Now, science rigorously debates whether this was primarily due to climate change at the end of the Ice Age, or what's known as the overkill hypothesis, which is our hunting pressure. But either way, the striking correlation between human arrival and the sudden disappearance of the planet's largest, most dominant animals is just a deeply fascinating piece of the evolutionary puzzle.
And this brilliantly illustrates a truly bizarre modern twist happening in our forests right now: the human shield effect. The ecological logic here is actually pretty simple. A deer fears a wolf, but a wolf fears a human much, much more. So the outcome? White-tailed deer and moose are actively exploiting our terrifying reputation. They deliberately position themselves closer to human settlements to give birth. They're using us as a literal shield, correctly calculating that the predator trailing them is way too terrified of our farmhouses to come any closer. We effectively become unwitting allies to the very animals we could otherwise hunt.
Section 6. The scariest thing alive.
Let's wrap up this explainer by reflecting on the massive evolutionary shadow our species currently casts over the entire natural world. From the perspective of nearly every other species on the planet, we are the single scariest thing in the room, on the savanna, in the forest, and at the waterhole. When an elephant or a badger runs from our voice, it's not being irrational, and it's certainly not being overly dramatic. It is reading a highly accurate, hard-won threat assessment that was paid for by countless generations of brutal trial and error across hundreds of thousands of years.
We really like to think of ourselves as clever, relatively harmless primates who read books and go camping to reconnect with nature. But our biological reality, which is measured entirely by the instincts of the animals around us, is vastly different. So I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. If our conversational voice alone is enough to reshape entire ecosystems and scatter the world's greatest beasts, how do we use the profound power of the super predator responsibly? It's a pretty heavy thought to carry with you the next time you step into the woods. Thank you so much for exploring this with me today, and keep questioning the fascinating